Welcome, everyone, to the JB Media Institute Digital Drop-In. We're so glad to have you here, as usual. And thanks for joining us the second Wednesday of October. I was away last week teaching in Pennsylvania, so I appreciate everyone accommodating that small shift. Today I'm really excited because we're going to talk about a topic that we don't cover very often, which is chatbots. And specifically, we're going to talk a little bit about Facebook Messenger and the opportunities that brands have to really market using that tool. And so this is something I know that has been of interest to people, but we haven't really covered it in our classes if you're a member of the Institute. I'm also excited today to have my friend Daniel Rock here.
Hello.
So you can see on the screen Daniel's bio, and Daniel and I actually met recently, and this is kind of what I consider a social media success story, which is that he reached out to me on LinkedIn to say that he was coming back to the Asheville area and wanted to connect. And the first time we hung out, I felt like we had a really good time.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So I'm really excited because Daniel has a lot of unique experience, especially in marketing and tourism, which is something that I think is, one of my kind of core passions. And he's had even more experience than me when it comes to actually executing some of these really cool messenger techniques. So we're going to talk a little bit about chatbots and what they are, but then we're going to move into kind of a Q&A, and Daniel's going to share with us basically some of kind of his experiences. But do you want to talk just a little bit about your background and kind of what you've done in marketing over the years?
Sure, no problem. I moved to France in 2010, where I learned French and I went back to school to study marketing specifically. So I majored in marketing and merchandising, and then later on at the University of Bordeaux, I specialized in e-commerce and what they called e-marketing, which is essentially digital marketing. After graduating, I worked with a software company as their community manager and later on their social media manager. And then I moved from that to working with pubs, believe it or not, in Bordeaux. I was the marketing director for a group of pubs and led all of their efforts everywhere from posters in the bathroom to loyalty programs and Facebook ads. And I love that. That is what sparked the relationship marketing bug in me. And so after that, I went independent and I helped companies in Bordeaux market specifically to English-speaking visitors, so the tourism industry. And that led me to work with the Bordeaux Tourism Office and eventually build a distribution system for all of their print efforts and continue with relationship marketing. My wife and I just moved to Asheville the 1st of August. So being back in the U.S. is still a little fresh. Forgive me if I stutter. I've been working on messenger marketing specifically for about the past 5 or 6 months. I really believe that it's the future of relationship marketing and conversational marketing, and that we're right at the start of it. So It's something really interesting and something that I've been working on. And I'd like to continue here in Asheville.
Yeah, and I'm excited because I think, your experience, especially with the pubs here in Asheville, is something that a lot of the breweries around here could really benefit from learning about, because I don't think everybody's innovating quite the same way here.
Right.
And if you don't know anything about Bordeaux, France, it's definitely got some things in common with Asheville in the sense that it's a place that draws a lot of visitors and has a really interesting kind of community culture that people are really into. So
the beverage industry.
Yeah.
It's very touristic.
Exactly. So anyway, like I said, I'm really excited. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day today to be here. Because like I said, I feel like this conversation is something that is new to me as well. It's a strategy that I haven't gotten to execute as often with students or clients. So I'm excited to let everybody kind of get a view of what's possible with the Messenger app. And I also think some of us have fatigue around Facebook advertising in general.
Oh yeah.
And
it's new to everybody. And
it's kind of, I know for me anyway, the Facebook ad manager, I'm really enjoying exploring some of the things that I haven't already used because it feels like the market is really saturated. So the more that we can innovate now rather than later, I feel like there's some real positives to that.
Of course, being ahead of the curve is the name of the game.
Yeah, so just to go over with everybody, and again, if you have questions about this, let us know. But I just wanted to do a quick overview of chatbots and what they are, because this is something I basically read about every week because it's a really kind of hot topic if you're in the marketing industry. You know, what are chatbots doing? What are the options? For those of you who aren't aware, chatbots are either sort of pre-programmed or they're being run by artificial intelligence, and they're really created so that people's questions could be answered without having to have a human being on the other end of the line. So it's really kind of started to become not just a chat bot, but as you can see, we have all these other lingo kind of buzzwords that are associated with it, like interactive agent, virtual assistant, conversational interface. And so I think what's happened is, you know, chatbots started out pretty simplistic with very easy pre-programmed answers. I think a good example would be the chatbot that you see on LinkedIn now. Mm-hmm. So when you're answering your messages on LinkedIn, it'll give you pre-created answers so you don't have to type. But now we see things are going as far as really having that artificial intelligence understand your questions and provide feedback based on it, which I think is the more complex part of it. The number one purpose for these things was really to save time by creating a way for people to get the information they need or get the answers to the questions they have just quickly and efficiently without having to require manpower. And now they're really doing more than just answering questions. They're actually having conversations.
It's an entire conversation flow. Mm-hmm.
And so, a lot of this is really about efficiency and how can we make sure that individuals who may have a lot of other things that they have to work on, especially in the marketing, communications, and customer service world, they have so many things they have to focus on now, so many channels to manage. I think this is a natural answer to how do we free up some time and save some money by maximizing. And you'll see I've included this link. So for all of you that are listening, you will get a copy of this recording and a copy of these slides. And so you'll be able to click on these links. This 2019 Guide to Chatbots from LearnG2's website is really, really great. So if this is something that you're interested in, I just want to suggest that you download that and take a look, and it's free. So why are companies choosing this? I think this is a really important question to answer because with all new things, we have to decide whether or not we have kind of the energy, the time, and the resources to invest in something new and go in a different direction. But I think there's really three key things that as I've been following this whole conversation over the last couple of years that are really important. One, people are more receptive to chatbots now than they've ever been. And I think for a lot of us, especially if you're my age, what we kind of had the experience of in our adulthood so far is the automated telephone kind of conversation, which I think most of us agree is terrible, right? So when you're in an automated phone system...
Type 1 if you agree.
Yeah, exactly. Press 1 if you hate being part of these automated phone messages. That for me, I think, is because it's not quite smart enough. You end up in loops, you can't get out of it. And I feel like chatbots really kind of right out the gate, we already know that's something nobody wants to interface with. So they worked really hard to try to avoid that type of experience. And Drift, Salesforce, and SurveyMonkey just did a really awesome joint study to dig into people and their relationship to chatbots. And they found that in the US, almost 70% of consumers would actually prefer it. Rather than calling, rather than getting a real person, if it's something simple, if it's a question where the answer is not necessarily going to have to be customized for you, but it's basic info, that, well over half of us are willing to just do it this way, get the answers to our questions because it's faster and easier.
Well, they can do it on their own time. And they don't have to worry about holding a phone to their ear and waiting for an automatic response.
Yeah.
They can choose exactly what kind of information they're looking for, and then the bot can be built to deliver that information immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And on Facebook alone, I was actually just researching this before the call last night. More than 8 billion messages have been exchanged between humans and bots in the last year. And I was like, that is a lot. So it's interesting that Facebook is really taking kind of a lead on this technology for sure. One of the other reasons I think this is really valuable to a lot of different brands is because the way that we're now using chatbots isn't just to answer the questions, give me a question that you have, I just kick you back an answer, but we're also engaging people and collecting information from them and then providing answers.
Oh, yeah.
So actually like honing out from the person different pieces of data that might be variables that affect the answer we're going to get. And I've really started to see that when people engage, if it's stuff that they think is valuable, if they're really going to the brand because they need something, they're okay coughing up their email or their name or information about themselves. And so it's really where we go into personalization. When people feel like they're having a personal conversation, even if they know it's a bot, they're just more likely to take action. They're more likely to do something if they feel like the information they're getting caters to who they are. And so we see that bots are, in some ways, gaining what most AI is gaining these days, which is kind of this emotional component of asking people, "What do you need? What do you want?"
Very much so. You want to program it to be it is a conversation. It's a conversational flow. I personally try and avoid the word bot as often as possible because it sounds impersonal. But if it's used correctly and measured correctly, it's a conversational flow from the start to the finish. The business or the marketing manager is already determined.
Yeah. So this is where I talk a lot in classes about how I think marketing and customer service are essentially the same thing these days. And that separating them out, I think, is now problematic because a lot of what we're doing, especially in social media, those two things just live alongside of each other. We're providing really good customer service to people. We're paying attention to them. We're having conversations with them while also sometimes marketing to them, getting them to buy in a deeper way, getting them to take an action that's really valuable for us. So I think this is something, again, to really think about because it's a really unique form of conversion and lead generation that's very different than what we see with traditional advertising. Because instead of, really trying to convince people to take the action, you end up in this conversation that sort of naturally leads them into the action. And I think that just sets a whole different tone with people. Of course, one of the other reasons I think a lot of people, and you just touched on this, Daniel, in your answer, is just, or in the additional info you gave, having the ability to provide 24-hour customer service is something small businesses have not been able to do in a lot of situations because they don't have the money or the manpower. And this solves a problem in a certain way because anytime the customer needs help with basic information, it's available to them no matter what time of day.
Yeah, customers, they want information. They want to buy, but they don't want to be sold to. And they want to know about what they're purchasing and what they're looking for. And businesses, effective businesses, should put that out there and let them be able to find it easily.
Yeah, and I think that's like sort of the core principle of doing relationship marketing.
Of course,
and really looking at the marketing from that relationship lens instead of, I think, what is a more traditional lens of like that push marketing.
Exactly.
It's like, I think it's relationship marketing to me is the inevitable outcome of all these years of talking about inbound. It's like that's what people want. They don't want to be forced into something. They want to come to you with a need and have you service that need very conveniently.
Right, exactly.
So again, if you have questions about anything related to chatbots and what they are, I think once you start digging into this, at least for me, over the last couple of years, I realize I'm interfacing with them sometimes more than I think I am. I've started to just become more aware of when things are automatically popping up and just facilitating a process that I need to go through. So the cool thing is Facebook, like I said, is taking the lead on this. And I know some of you who've attended our calls before, I often recommend going to the Facebook for Business website and digging into all the different things that they offer because they have free blueprint classes and all sorts of tutorials and things that I think are really useful. But I've pulled some screenshots directly from the site where they really talk about Messenger specifically and how developing your bot on their system can be so valuable. And they're following suit to what we just talked about. It can help you simplify the process for getting customers. It makes transactions easy and more personal. You can also build your brand awareness, and you can also really make this more emotional connection by having a conversation with them. So if this is something at the end of the call you want to explore, I really want to encourage you to click on these links that I'm sharing because these are basically coming from the Facebook for Business website. And I think they just do a great job of really helping you understand how these things are going to work within your system, no matter how you implement them.
That same website also put together a lot of really great success stories from larger companies such as Lego, Sephora, businesses like that have implemented messenger bots. So for anyone interested, feel free to look at their success stories and how they're combining Facebook ads and messenger bots.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually read those quite a bit. I really like those. So we have a question here. Our target demographic is over 50. Have you seen any data about people in that age range and how they respond to chatbots? Have you seen any specific studies at all?
I have not seen specific studies of that age range. I've run tests with people in that age range, and I found that you need to be crystal clear in your message. You want to avoid the free type. You don't really want to give them the chance to answer freely in the type, because it's a lot more complicated to program automatic responses to a free type of message. But if you list out very clear options and you give them clear buttons to choose from, then that works really well.
Yeah, I would say it's funny. I haven't seen any studies yet on the effectiveness of chatbots with different age groups when it comes to marketing. But there's sort of two things that I've read about, especially in relationship specifically to Facebook. So one is that we know on Facebook the fastest growing audience or members that are joining Facebook over the last, probably 5 years at least, I would say, are people in that age range. So people over 50 are adopting use of Facebook quite a bit. And so I do think that in general, we can assume that Facebook is facilitating a lot of things that it feels like speak to that market. Because they're not necessarily the most popular social media with younger people, right? So I feel like that just alone sort of tells us that chatbots do have a place in markets that are not considered the younger 20-somethings or maybe even 30-somethings, because Facebook's realizing they get a lot more action from people over those age groups. So people my age, like over 40 and beyond, we're actually a huge portion of Facebook's membership now. The other thing I will say is that Daniel and I were talking earlier about how I have been receiving some really interesting chatbot marketing from Sierra Club in their fundraising. And one of the things I've read about with Sierra Club is definitely their demographic is also skewing in that age range. And I would say one thing about Sierra Club is that they do what Daniel just said. So their chatbot messages are really clear. They send me the marketing when they want me to sign a petition, when they want me to click to actually donate to something. So I don't get multiple calls to action in a lot of that.
Right.
I get one clear call to action instead of, I think there's some options, and we'll look at these examples, some options of actually, you go through the chatbot experience and it's giving you multiple choices. You can see things from different perspectives. But I think we're just going to see that in the marketing for over 50, we just target the message more directly. We don't want them to have, it's the same way with forums actually. When you have a market over 50, you don't want your forums on your website to be really long and complicated, because those people get impatient and stop completing them. So it's you end up needing to break things into more steps, if that makes sense. So one thing though is I'll definitely keep that in mind and see as I'm continuing to follow things, if studies ever come out, and try to share that on our social media for JB Media, because I'm sure with chatbots, those studies exist somewhere. They might just not be available to the public at this point as easily as some others are.
It's still a pretty new technology. And I think to kind of separate Facebook from Messenger, they're two different platforms, and there are Facebook Messenger, the Messenger platform, is being used more than any social media platform out there, more than Facebook and more than the rest of them. So I think that a lot of the older generation and that age range is using Messenger to communicate with everyone else, whether they're on Facebook or not.
Yeah. No, agreed. And that's a really good point, because I think a lot of times we forget, because Messenger is part of Facebook, that it is its own application. It is now a separate being, technically speaking. I can delete the Facebook app and keep Messenger on my phone at this point.
Exactly.
So somebody was also asking, can you explain what free type is?
Yeah, no problem. I might have gotten a little bit ahead of myself. When you're communicating with a bot or a conversation flow, there are usually two ways to do it. You can either click on a predetermined button, and they're two different buttons, or you can be given the option to type in your answer. So if the bot asks you a question, you can respond to that question by typing in your answer. And that's difficult in the sense that you have to program responses to every possibility. What you don't want is for someone to type in an answer that your bot doesn't understand. The worst thing to do is to receive the, "I'm sorry, I don't understand what you said because I'm just a bot. Could you please," you don't want to fall into that.
Yeah.
I call it a break in the conversation. You don't want to have a break in the conversation. So putting buttons out there and making the questions very clear avoids any confusion, especially with the older generation that are using that.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense to what I was saying too about Sierra Club's approach is really sort of just click this one thing or click this one thing and then click this one thing. And that's it. You're not really free typing your answers into anything. But I still find their marketing to be really effective because if you care about the issues that they care about, they're actually making it extremely easy for you to engage with the issues. And it's funny because Sierra Club sometimes will send me Facebook Messenger messages like once a day for a week. And normally I feel like I would be like, get out of my inbox. This is too much. But because I work in environmentalism in my personal time, it's actually almost always something I want to engage with. And so they've kind of know that, which I think is interesting. Like because they're a nonprofit and they're more values based, their messaging is a little different than, let's say, if they were trying to sell me T-shirts or something.
Right.
So with Facebook, there are more than 300,000 Facebook chatbots that are live as of this year. And they're making, basically making Facebook Messenger one of the most common platforms for chatbot use. So like I said, they're trying to sort of dominate and take the lead in this, I think. When you go to their website, like I said, you'll be able to click on these in the copy of the presentation I send you. You can build your own experience in Messenger, and then we're going to talk about some of the other awesome tools that are out there. And then this is also being integrated into the Facebook Ads Manager. So there's actually an option when you are creating your ads to choose Messenger as your objective and to build out this entire experience from an ad perspective. And we'll talk about we'll look at sort of those two different ways that this happens. But essentially, again, if you go to the Facebook for Business website, they're going to show you examples like this. So this is where it kind of shows you how the ad looks in the list, right? So we can see this Jasper's Market ad right here. It's kind of identified as an ad because we always have sort of that transparency of what is sponsored versus not sponsored. And then when somebody clicks on it, it essentially takes them into the actual message. And so again, this is a really simple driving somebody just to shop on the website. And I think we just want to understand the difference between something like this versus the chatbot experience, which I think is a little deeper and more conversational.
Right.
This is more like the ad just popping up into Messenger and connecting you with the person or the brand. But I feel like there's also the examples we're going to look at in a minute that are more of that conversational back and forth. So when you're getting into Facebook Messenger marketing, I think you just want to be thinking about there's some really simple things that I think are still more sort of traditional ad based.
Right. Impulse clicking.
Yeah. And I feel like these are a little bit more interruptive is what I would call them. Not that they're all negative. They definitely work for some people.
It's funny you say that. Facebook has received the same type of message with these ads that are in the Messenger app itself. And so they've been diverting a lot of that to the Discover button. If you open up your Facebook Messenger app, you have buttons down at the bottom. And the one on the bottom right is Discover, and that is Discover businesses around you. And that is thanks to companies that are investing in Messenger marketing.
Yeah.
So even Facebook themselves are trying to get away from the disruptive push marketing campaigns.
Yeah. Well, I think that's because every time they do a study from their own users, we're all like, stop sticking ads in all my stuff. Yeah. So we all have to keep remembering how important it is to complain to them about that stuff, because they will, they don't want to turn their whole platform into nothing but like an ad experience.
Right. No, their goal is to keep you on their platform. They want that experience to be as streamlined as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And so here you can see, again, just an example of what you'll see in the Facebook Ads Manager. If you go in and you're choosing your objective, right when you first start your campaign, literally you have messages as the option under consideration. And so the website will break down how all of this works. But like I said, I want to spend the rest of the time kind of talking to Daniel just about his experiences and asking him some questions about how Messenger plays into all of this. And then please feel free to jump in and ask additional questions as well. If we don't get through all of ours, that's fine. I would rather everybody on the call get answers to things that they're interested in. So just feel free to join in. But my first question was really just about the sort of place that I think all of this chatbot stuff, holds in marketing overall. And I think it's really related to this move into personalization. So personalization is a huge trend these days. And especially in social media, I think it's becoming, I know this year at the beginning of 2019, I saw a thing where they were like, we declare this the year of personalization. Like they always do. They declare it the year of something. You kind of touched on this before, but do you think this is a trend that's going to continue? And why do you think this trend is something people are responding to so well?
That's a great question. Personally, I don't think it's a trend. I think it's the future of digital marketing. I think it's the future of marketing in general, but digital is kind of paving the way. Everyone wants a custom tailored message to what they need. And personalization is just a business creating that custom message and then giving it to the end user. What's great is Facebook and Google and their analytics and their targeting capabilities, you can hone in on a very specific buyer persona. You can hone in on your target customer. You know who that person is, you know what they like, and you know what they want to hear. So it's no longer, the business owner's no longer pointing a shotgun at a barn and hoping that a BB's going to hit it. That business owner, now he's got a sniper rifle and he's aiming at the door handle. He knows exactly who he's looking for and he knows exactly what message they need. So I think it's the future of marketing in general. Yeah,
that's awesome because I really agree with that. I think the way, even just the success of stories across multiple platforms and social media tells me that personalization level is something that really attracts people.
It's funny you say that. Facebook just integrated into their story capability a send message option.
Yeah.
So now people could be watching your story of the great stuff you're doing at your company, and they can send you a message and connect with you immediately.
Yeah. So when it comes to Facebook Messenger, again, we sort of started talking about this, but on Facebook specifically, can you sort of deduce why, when you've run campaigns before, people are responding to it? Like, what do you think the motivation is? Is it really just that it's catered directly to them? Do you think there's more to it? I'm just curious, when you see the results and you're talking to a client, are you like, well, what we're doing is the person is responding to this thing?
Yeah, it's definitely personalized. The first step is segmenting your contact list. So as soon as someone enters into your message, your conversation flow, one of the first things you should do is not only get their email address, because you always want the email address and you never know what's going to happen with Facebook, so that's always very important. But secondly, asking them what's important to them. So for example, if I'm engaging with a bar's messenger, that bar should ask me, thanks for connecting with us, Daniel. What are you interested in? Are you interested in new beers, or are you interested in special offers, or are you interested in upcoming events? And so when I choose and I tell them what I'm interested in, from that point on, all of the content that I receive is tailored to my interests. So it keeps me engaged and it avoids that spam feeling of, oh, I don't care about this. I don't care. Why are they telling me this?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore because the company knows exactly what you're interested in.
Yeah, and that's awesome because I think people who are using Facebook, honestly, a lot of us on Facebook feel like there's a lot of clutter. And I think exactly what you're describing, it means that it's going to tone down the clutter that I'm getting. If you really understand what I'm interested in, then I'm going to get information that I might actually want. And I think all of us are kind of, especially in the Facebook world, we're kind of aching for that filtration, right? Because there's so much information on there. So I've got another great question here, which is, what if you work in a more sensitive industry, or an industry where human interaction and connection is really, really important? I operate a cemetery. I can see chatbots being helpful for answering common questions, but I'm wondering if it would be a turnoff to people to interact, quote unquote, with a bot when it comes to something like that.
Right. It can be, which is why you want to avoid it feeling like a bot. I I usually hear the same people have the same type of conversations with their customers all the time. It's generally the same conversation, and as long as the bot, again, I don't really like that. I prefer to call it a conversational flow. If you build your conversation flow out the same way you would engage with a customer that would come through the door, then it doesn't feel like a bot. And if you're asking the right questions and answering those questions in the same way you would do it face to face, it feels like a personal interaction. Obviously, at the end, if there's ever a hiccup or a break in the conversation, you always want to direct them to a real person anyway. So sorry, I didn't understand that. Someone will be with you shortly, or feel free to call us if you'd like to talk to somebody on the phone. So having that option really helps that feeling of it being impersonal.
Well, and I think too, there's two other things you could consider. One is, I think, there's some level of transparency that matters. So like I said, chatbots also go by many other names that we come up with for them to make them more human seeming and less body. And so I think that sometimes too, transparency at the beginning of the conversation.
Absolutely. Saying,
this is our virtual assistant.
This is an automatic conversation.
This is, even if you don't want to say it's automatic, but you want to just indicate this is not the person in charge of things. And then I think adding to that transparency is giving those people that option anytime that conversation to know exactly how they actually get on the phone or via email with an actual person who can be more one-on-one, so that they don't have to search for that. That's, I think, the key thing is you don't want somebody in a conversation with a bot that's more automated, and then it becomes difficult for them to step out of that. And that's where I think running a business like yours, that would be really important for people to know. If what I really need is human contact right now to deal with this situation, that becomes super obvious to me where that is.
Right.
I also think we can assume on Facebook Messenger, if someone's contacting your brand that way, that if they needed that level of one-on-one conversation, they may also have already decided to call you.
I would agree with that.
Other than hop on Facebook and send a message. I just think there is sort of a consciousness around the fact that when you're on Facebook and you're sending something through Messenger, that you're going to be interfacing potentially with something automated. I think there is an understanding for most people that that's true, or that possibility exists. And so, the other thing too, you can make sure, to Daniel's point, is when you're working on the flow, test it.
Of course.
And don't just test it with people that work in your business.
No.
Get a few people that don't work for you, that are outside of the situation, to test it and really tell you whether it felt super automated and impersonal or it actually felt like a good flow. And sometimes when you build the flow, you shouldn't be the one testing the flow because you've been working on it and you're not the greatest judge. And so that's where I was like, get 3 of your friends or get people outside of your business just to do you that favor of providing that feedback about it before you launch it to the public.
Absolutely. And even after launch, that's a really vital time to be watching what happens. You can see the conversation flow as it happens. And so after you launch this type of setup, you want to be on the computer for the 2 days after that and read every single conversation and make sure that those people are getting the information that they're looking for and that they're not running into a break.
Yeah, because that's what's going to allow you to know if it's really useful for people and valuable for them to have that access, which I think is really important. All right, so our next question. So what kind of campaigns have you run? I know you've touched on a little bit of working with the pubs and some of the other places. And I know we've got some examples in here that we can click through. So I just want you to kind of share a little bit about those campaigns. I'm just going to move us into looking at some of these.
Yeah, this is a demo that I built recently that kind of put forward a couple different types of campaigns. So what you see on the left is the introduction. Thank you very much for contacting us. I am a mobile assistant. Obviously, you always want to include the ability to unsubscribe at any time. FYI, feel free to type stop at any time to unsubscribe. It's important to include that because you don't want to feel like you're pressuring anybody to continue with the conversation. And then after that, on the bottom left, those are segment tabs. So as soon as someone says what type of person they are, that attributes a tag to them so that the following information is for that type of person specifically. And then on the right, those are 3 different types of objectives that people are achieving with Messenger: generating leads, That's something as easy as running a Facebook ad and then directing them towards a conversation flow that gives them all the information that they're looking for. The example here was a dentist's office. People want to know if I have a cavity, what is it exactly? You know, if my tooth hurts, could it be this, that, and the other? Sometimes people are hesitant to talk with a professional because they don't want to sound stupid. They don't want to sound like they don't know what's going on. So in those type of industries, you could always put Q&As together to generate those leads, and then at the end of that session, you always give them the option to schedule an appointment or speak with a real person. Here on the left is a special offer option. So that would be to boost traffic in store in a brick and mortar location, where you can send out chat blasts and give people incentives to come in and say hi. So that works really well. If you notice on the bottom left, the redeem button, that's a one-click only button. So there are two types of buttons in Facebook, this type of Facebook Messenger system. The ones on the right are menu buttons, and the one on the left is a one-time only click button. So once that button's been clicked once, it cannot be clicked again, which means that you can choose exactly what kind of information is going out according to what people are engaging with. And then the one on the right is the dentist example that I was telling you about earlier. That's just, how can we help you? Here are our services. You can meet our dentists. Basically get all the information you need to make a decision of whether or not you'd like to schedule an appointment with us.
And I want to say, when I send out the recording and the slides, I'm going to share the link to the demo that Danielle created where you can see some of this live. And I was doing it last night just so I could see it in action and not just in the screenshots. And I just want to encourage everybody to do it because it was really interesting. And especially this dentistry one, I really, it just really worked for me. I was like, man, this is so straightforward. And I go to a chiropractor and also a massage therapist. And, you know, I do all of my booking through Facebook. And because both of them have good Facebook pages and the book now button is right there. So like, I never go to their website. I never call their office. Every time I want an appointment, I just go book it. And I think this is just a really, it was just awesome because I was like, I need to tell both of them to start thinking of this. Because if they wanted to prompt more scheduled appointments, I feel like this really made sense to me when I clicked around. And so when you get that link, like I said, you can click and actually experience these kind of live so that you see them.
Yeah, we found that people don't like feeling silly. They don't want to call up and not know what they're talking about, and they also don't. Who has time for that anymore? You know, everybody's rushed and everybody wants to find out whatever information they're looking for on their own time. So this type of setup, this type of automatic conversation flow allows a business to give that to customers. Here on the left is the drive awareness example. So for example, there's a sod company that we built a flow for that found that they were answering the same questions over and over. Nobody knows about different types of sod. All they know is that they got a big old brown patch in their backyard and they need some grass.
Yeah.
So this sod business was answering the same questions over and over and informing their clients. But they've built this flow that does that automatically and allows people to determine what's best for them. That way, they don't feel like they're being sold to. They're not being sold to. They're looking for information, they're receiving that information, and they're making a decision themselves based on what they think is necessary for them. So that conversation is continuing in the middle flow. So that's part of the questions. Question number one, you know, is what's good for your property? Is your property in the sun or in the shade? Is there foot traffic? Are people going to be walking on the grass? All of these questions lead them to the best option for them, and that really helps. That really helped boost sales because. Once again, people don't like feeling stupid, and so they want to get this information and they want it to be easy. Yeah. And then on the right is the end of the redeem offer option for the bar example, for the special offer example. So as you can see, they click the redeem button once, and then they've been given another. You always want to tell users twice when this is happening, because sometimes people click redeem while they're sitting on their couch. But the point is, you need to be in the business to redeem the special offer. So you give them a warning, let them know, are you paying your bill now? Are you in store? Are you really ready for this? And then when they say, yep, I'm in store, I'm with the cashier, I'm ready to redeem this special offer, they click again, redeem offer, and then they get the message, thank you so much. How much was your bill? And so this question down at the bottom allows the business to measure very specifically the ROI of this conversation. So because they had someone come in, they had someone redeem the special offer, we asked how much the check was, they typed in how much the check was, that business owner knows exactly what ROI they're getting out of their campaign.
So we have this question from Daniel. One of the foundational challenges I have been thinking about these things is that as I segment my Facebook people more and more in the name of personalization, how do you manage and conceptualize your overall customer journey? Seems like within just a couple of months, you could have quite a few subsets of your tribe, and the complication and content requirements in your funnels increasingly geometrically. Or am I overthinking?
You're not overthinking. It's definitely a valid point. Love your name, by the way. So no, that's true, and it can get overwhelming. There's systems or softwares that you can use that automatically put forward the different segments that you're working with. Obviously, it's up to you to create the content that is targeted to those individuals. But it can be complicated. My suggestion is to keep it as simple as possible. You don't want to overwork yourself, so keep your segments as simple as possible and keep the messages that you're targeting to those segments exactly what they need.
Yeah, and I think, there's something about what I call the campaign mindset, Daniel, which I think is where sometimes once we realize that we've got this audience and they're starting to break down into their really specific, subsets, but more or less what we're talking about is their needs. Like they're breaking down into things that are really what their needs are, what their wants are, what it is that they're expecting. I find sometimes it means that we have to spend more time on the front end really conceptualizing what we're campaigning for.
Exactly.
Because the truth is we can't campaign for everything from everybody all at once. So we end up sitting down and looking at the next 6 months or 12 months and really saying, okay, we've got to prioritize some of the audiences here and campaign directly for them. And then, we sort of look at it in phases, like phase 1, 2, 3. So right now we're going to be focusing in on these particular services for these particular people, really campaign for that stuff, accomplish some goals that we want to accomplish, and then decide if we're continuing to campaign down that road or have we saturated that at this point and we want to focus on another market. And so I just think actually what you're talking about is definitely not overthinking. It's a problem that almost everybody has because of the age of personalization is creating this world where nobody wants something that they don't think applies to them. And so I think every student that I work with is pretty much working on figuring out how do we prioritize the who
right, exactly.
in the work that we're doing.
Yep, exactly.
And then here I see the other question. We hardly get anyone reaching out to us via Messenger. How does one ascertain whether or when chatbots should be integrated as part of their marketing strategy?
That's common. My first advice would be to put systems in place for people to reach out via Messenger. There are several different opt-in options. One is putting a messenger option on your website. Instead of people going straight to the Contact Us page, they could click on a messenger button on the front page of your website. Another one is setting up your Facebook page to receive messages, making your call to action button the send message button and not the visit website button, for example. And then as you see here, creating a Facebook ad with the call to action being specifically to send a message. Putting in place a conversation flow like this and building out a messenger system is all about creating your contact list. You want to have these people engage with you so that you can contact them in the future. And it's just like an email list, but in Messenger. So you want to give them every opportunity possible to engage with you in Messenger first.
Yeah, so I think that's an important point to make. And just to continue, sort of how do you decide that it's time? I mean, I think it really comes down to, again, on the front end, thinking about who you want to campaign to and whether or not you can create a flow that's actually really going to make sense for both you and the customer, because the whole goal of the flow is for it to save time. Right. So it's got to be motivated by that. If you've never done it before and you're not really promoting Messenger as a way for people to contact you, then you're going to want to do what Daniel said and actually start to let people know that someone is available there, that they can get answers to their questions. And I think you're trying to create a solution to solve a problem. And that problem is we need to more easily get this information to people, or we need to more personally engage people so that they convert. I also work with a lot of students where Messenger is already naturally starting to play this role for them. So that, I think, is a first indicator. You're saying nobody's really using Messenger to contact you. There are definitely companies where that's just not part of what their audience is doing. So if your audience is never going to want to communicate in that way, that's okay. Then you don't need to spend time on this. You could basically test it by doing what Daniel's talking about and make it more of a forward-facing piece, and then see how people respond to it, moving more to the forefront. But I think for other people that are already seeing action, it's like if you're already spending a certain amount of time per week answering questions on Messenger, if you already know that this is something your customers are seeing as another typical way of contacting you, that's when I'm like, now we need to start to see how we make that more efficient. Because once people start using that Messenger piece and they get used to that being part of how they reach out to you, that can start to generate a lot of action pretty quickly. But again, they don't typically do it unless you're inviting them to do it. So a lot of companies, they're not telling their customers one way they can get support is through Facebook Messenger. And then as soon as we let them know that's a possibility, all of a sudden people are like, oh, I can do it that way instead of emailing. Cool, I'm just going to do that, because it's so easy for them to do that on the fly when they're on their phone or something like that. Just, it's so much easier than sending an email through my email program and doing all that stuff. And I definitely think Messenger is better if you know that a good chunk of your audience is mobile. So if they're using mobile devices a lot, I think that's an indicator as well that you could have some real positive effect by using some of these strategies. So I know that we are coming to the end. And we've got a few questions we haven't gotten to, but I want Daniel to kind of wrap us up. Just talking about, we've touched on some of the best practices, but like if you were just going to give people maybe the top 3 tips, especially since we've got some people who've never tried this before, what are kind of your basic best practices, or what have you learned by doing this the last few months, especially more in depth, so that somebody who wants to jump in and maybe test how this could work for them?
Yeah, of course. I think number one is keep it simple. You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to have big blocks of text. When people are sending and receiving messages, they're usually short and sweet. So I would suggest building a conversation flow that's the exact same way. If you use auto responses, never more than 3 separate dialogues, because I mean, if you're on the other end of that and all you hear is bing, 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 that's just annoying and you're blowing somebody's phone up, which a lot of people tend to want to do when they try and keep it short and sweet. So just a few dialogues, just a few options, and very clear call to actions. Like I was saying earlier, the buttons make a world of difference. Giving people 3 options and really clear buttons avoids any breaks in the conversation.
And then also, I'm curious, I know that you've been using some third-party tools. Could you just share briefly what is your favorite third-party tool that you've been using, and maybe what are sort of the benefits, because Facebook has their own way of doing this. So what is the benefit of kind of bringing in another tool, or are there pitfalls even? Right.
Well, the easiest analogy, it's just like a email marketing software, but for Facebook Messenger specifically. And so there are 3 players. There are many players right now, but there are 3 main ones. ManyChat, M-A-N-Y chat. ManyChat is probably the number 1 and the simplest and easiest to use. It's very visual. It creates links between dialogues, so you know exactly where your user is going to be going if they click or engage with this dialogue or that dialogue. Chat Funnel is really good too. They have a lot of free templates. To be honest, all three have free templates. So if you just want to download one of their templates and enter your information, it's really quick and really easy to set up. My personal favorite is Mobile Monkey because I have more of an analytical thought to it. It's more of an if this then that situation. So you enter in your initial dialogue, and then as you choose where you want the conversation to go, you can say, okay, if the user clicks on this button, then take them to this conversation. Mm-hmm. If they want to backtrack, then you can bring them back to this conversation. So those three are probably the top ones. Feel free to look at their websites. They're all free to try and free to use. Their payment prices are different according to your needs, but they all have templates, and they all make linking your Facebook page to a conversation flow really simple.
Yeah, and I just want to say I actually checked out Mobile Monkey once Daniel and I kind of talked about this, and I thought it was really cool what they were doing because of that one thing that you just said, if this, then this.
Yep.
That ability to kind of route people into different things kind of goes back to the question we had about, what if we have a bunch of subsets
Exactly.
of our main audience? It's like the Mobile Monkey system really seemed to me to kind of facilitate, like, okay, we have this like audience that's similar, like, all the people are similar to each other, but when we break down and really look at them, they have slightly different things that they need or slightly different services that they might want. And so it allows you to still like address that really clearly. And so it's just, like I said, kind of having a segmentation that then has subsets to that segmentation. I feel like Mobile Monkey is kind of allowing you to think of that and then implement it into the workflow and see if that,
Right.
The conversation flow.
Right. You build out dialogues or conversations that you already expect to happen, and then you link them together the way you expect them to be linked together. Mm-hmm. Obviously, before you launch, test it and make sure that the flow is the way you think it's going to be, and that there aren't any breaks in the conversation, that people aren't typing weird things in the middle of the flow. The systems are really great.
Yeah, and I think too, remember with your conversation flows, the things that you're campaigning for or working on when it comes to this type of system, is it for customer service or is it for marketing and sales?
Right.
Or is there some combination of those two things that is going to happen? And I think that's just when you look at more and more examples, you go to Facebook and read the success stories, you really see that marketing and sales and customer service are weaving together.
Correct.
In this whole world. And so I think that's just something unique about this particular strategy, that it brings those things together, allows you to provide customer service in a way that then makes it more likely for people to then take an opportunity that you give them at the end of that,
right.
To either convert again or to sign up for something new, all of that. So I know we want to go ahead and let everyone go for the rest of the day. If there's any other questions, you can post them into the chat or you can put them into the Q&A, and we will gladly stay for a few other moments. But as usual, thank you all for joining us. And in the future, if you need any other support, always keep us in mind for our digital drop-ins. Our next one will be November 6th, and we will be talking about search engine optimization. We'll have some great members of the JB Media agency team here to talk about getting real about search engine optimization in 2020. You also have access to our free digital marketing toolkit, and if you're interested in learning about our newest class that launched just recently, a couple weeks ago, the Content Strategy Roadmap, when you get a copy of these slides, you can click these links and learn more. But thank you all for being here. Thanks for the great questions that you all submitted, and I look forward to connecting with you next month. And thanks for joining us, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a great rest of your day.